2, clear takeoff, left hand. Takeoff left, this is speed 1. Left land, swim west, copy. Speed 1. Crossing 2-1. Crossing at 2-4 is
Hello and welcome to the Blueskies podcast. I'm PR Ganapathy, your host.
S2Ep07, roger, report type southeast, connection, speed 4, midway, and field selected.
It's my great pleasure to finally get on the program somebody who's been a big inspiration for me and really was the motivation to get into this field of recording the conversations with military aviators. PVS Jagan Mohan. Jagan is, the author of multiple books on the Indian Air Force. The first book, which very few people know about, is about the Westland Wapiti, the Air Force's first aircraft. And then a really great book on the India-Pakistan Air War of 1965 and Eagles over Bangladesh, which is about the air war in the East during the 1971 war for the liberation of Bangladesh. Jagan also manages or hosts the Air Force part of the Bharat Rakshak website, or is it the whole website? I'm not sure. I'm sorry, Jagan. But and also Warbirds of India, where he documents where former military aircraft are parked or can be seen or displayed. So he's just doing all of this as purely a labor of love. So welcome to the program, Jagan. It's so glad to have you on, and just look forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Gans. A very good morning to you. I know it's been night over here. I'm really honored to be on your podcast and to join all the legendary aviators and experts who have graced this program before me. So it's amazing to see the ground that you have covered over the weeks and over and it's been only like what 1.5 years, and it's like a ton of information that I can't even keep up with. So your podcast is like a library to me, where I have books that I have read and I have books that I haven't read. So it is always there waiting for me to come and cover this. I'm finally glad that we could get together on this.
Likewise. Thanks so much for doing this late at night for you. We start off by getting to know our guests. So I'd just love to know where you grew up and what was your motivation to get interested in researching, documenting, and writing about the history of the Air Force?
Sure. Basically, my family is from Hyderabad, Secunderabad, one and the same. Multiple generations have, were based out of Secunderabad. We are primarily a railways family. My great grandfather was in the railways, grandfather was in the railways, several grand uncles were in that. So I had zero connection with the Indian Air Force or with military aviation. Absolutely no connection at all with the armed forces. But I do give credit to my uncle, my dad's younger brother, where he used to, in the early 80s, he used to bring a lot of war comics home. And he would loan us to his nephews like me, and I grew up on a steady diet of commando comics, war picture library, battle picture libraries, and I knew what a Spitfire looked like, what a Hurricane looked like. Even before I knew that there was a Royal Indian Air Force that participated in the Second World War, I knew everything about the Royal Air Force, Battle of Britain, and all the Luftwaffe and everything that World War II grew up as a kid. Then somewhere, I guess I knew, like maybe around 10, 11 years old, I know that India and Pakistan and China were involved in conflict and war, but it took some time before I was able to build knowledge about the military history about the Indian Armed Forces, and how it happened is quite interesting. My dad got basically got admitted as a temporary member in the Secunderabad Club. And Secunderabad Club had a wonderful library, beautiful collection of books. So that was one of the things that sort of kicked off my interest. Parallelly, there in 1988 or so, there was a story about Scotland leader A.B. Devaya. There they spoke about the 1965 war and how Devaya was lost during the war, and it's only after 25 years or 23 years or so they sort of established that he shot down a starfighter and the Mahavir Chakra was awarded. I read those news articles at that time, and that sort of caught my interest. I was still a teenager at that time, and subsequently I went back to the library at the Secunderabad Club and started digging up the books that were there. And one of the books that really molded my thinking was Air Chief Marshal Lal's My Years with the IAF. Prior to getting the book, I sort of had an idea because I read a review of it in India Today magazine. So I know it was a book that dealt with the Indian Air Force and its air combat history. And I still remember when I found that book, I was able to borrow it, brought it home. I did not sleep throughout the night. I completely read it end to end till the next day morning. So this combination of things, reading about Devaya's story, reading about the book, the H. Marshal Lal's book, and it was beautifully written. And I realized that it's not just the array of Spitfires and German Messerschmitt. There is also a story that I would like to know, which is Indian Air Force Nats versus PVS Sabres, MiG-21 starfighters, and pretty much Air Chief Marshal Lal's book was what sort of set the base in my interest for Indian aviation history. And it satisfied the curiosity about what happened in the 1971 Air War. But when you read the book, Air Chief Marshal Lal or Mrs. Lal, who actually completed the book, they only cursorily touched the 1965 portion of it, and it is very. They don't write about it in detail, but at the same time, there are little tidbits here and there, and you get a feeling that the story was not told. So that was a secondary journey that I had to start off with. Okay, I knew a lot about the 71 Air War now, but what actually happened in 65? And that's where some of all the aviation history adventures that I set off started, trying to find out what actually happened in the subsequent wars, earlier wars, and things like that. Personally, my family, my dad was in the AP state government service. And he was actually quite encouraging to me that, hey, if I wanted to try in the armed forces, I should give it a shot. And since I had this history, I did give it my best shot. Unfortunately, did not make it. So the Indian Air Force's loss was probably its gain as well, because I got very interested in the Air Force history and was able to do something for it subsequently. So that's my background.
Lovely. And, I think you subsequently have recently taken up flying yourself and have, almost completed the requirements to get your pilot's license. So I guess, you've joined the ranks of aviators in some sense, right?
Yes, I mean, after reading about the people that I idolized, surrounded by friends who are flyers just like you, uh, interacting, interviewing fighter pilots, there was always this dream about, okay, maybe I should learn flying, but I was always lazy to actually attempt it, because I know flying is just more than just getting in the cockpit and taking off. It's about learning. It is about studying the laws, studying the rules, radio communication, navigation. I mean, it was as if I was visiting, attending college all over again. So I sort of knew in the back of my mind, it's going to be very difficult. It's probably not going to happen. But then COVID stuck. I had a lot of time on my hand. I said, all right, let me try and see. Let me try and read up on it. How difficult is the exam? How, what is the theory? And that sort of kicked it off. Uh, Fortunately, I was able to do a lot of flying this past 1.5 years. I finished the requirements. I do have to go. I did have some trouble with my check ride. I do need to sort of go back and give that particular test again. But it's been an awesome feeling. Can you imagine somebody taking to the air at almost 48 years of age, where you think your life is already over? And and yeah, that was a great adventure that I'm still continuing. We'll see where it will take us. I gotta say one more thing, Guns. I feel like an imposter because the amount of people I spoke with who got thousands of awards, flew supersonic fighters, low level. I mean, it's. I mean, compared to what the veterans and heroes have done, it's you get the feeling that what I'm doing is nothing. Uh,
I know I often say that the maximum speed of my aircraft is probably less than the takeoff speed of the aircraft my father flew.
which
you
is true.
know.
I mean, which is true. But yeah, I know.
Anyway, but my father also used to tell me that even the lightest aircraft can kill you if you don't treat it with respect. So when he flew with me, he would always treat the aircraft with great respect because it has that capability. But anyway,
That is so true. I mean, one of the unfortunate, I don't say unfortunate, but when you're being an aviation historian, you read about not only the good stories, but you also read about the tragic stories. You write about the heroes, you read and research about the famous battles and stories. But aviation is also a saga of lives lost over the years. I mean, for every war, you will see hundreds of flyers would have paid the price in flying training. So I did over the years while reading and collecting information, I did grow up with a sense of respect about aviation and the risks that aviators take, especially military aviators. So I totally get it when you say treat the aircraft with respect, treat the environment with respect. Yeah, you can't take anything for granted there.
true, true. Hey, so your first involvement was Bharat Rakshak. Tell me more about that. How did you do it? What was the thinking behind it? And
Yeah.
it's now kind of become a real, single point of truth for a lot of people.
Hmm. So multiple things. I'll come to Bharat Rakshak in a minute. So you remember where I left off the story that I was quite I read these books. I was trying to find out about what happened in the 65 war. So in the early 90s, my apart from doing completing my graduation studies and other things, I would spend most of my time visiting my local libraries within Hyderabad. There were some great libraries like the State Central Library. The Osmania University Library was an awesome place. They had some fantastic collection of military books, aviation history, military history. I would go and read up on not only the Indian Air Force related books, which are very few, but there was a lot of published material on the Indian Army and battle. So I was into military history throughout the early 90s. I was collecting material, collecting books, um, and wherever I could find the snippets about 65, I was gathering them. And to satisfy my own curiosity, I was putting a very rough draft of a story that I was writing myself. And honestly, when I look back at it, it was nothing. It was just material that has been borrowed from two to three sources and being compiled like one timeline of stories. Then 1997, the internet came to Hyderabad, and that opened up a world of possibilities. Even before I could get access to the internet, I've been reading about it. People were talking about World Wide Web and how you could put some search keywords and find things. And the first time that I got access to the internet, I figured out, okay, there must be a search engine. And I remember it was probably Yahoo, which was a search engine at that time. And I went in, and my first keywords were Indian Air
Right,
Force.
right.
and and at that time, if you type in Indian Air Force, it will take you to only one place, and that is the Bharat Rakshak Vayusena site set up by Rupak Chattopadhyay. Rupak, see. And I went to the site. I saw Rupak's work. Rupak had already set it up. We had some basic, not basic. It was fairly detailed. He had things like types of aircraft, units, squadron listings. His history section was a little bit bare, but the site had a lot of where the primary structure was already there. And I was like so excited looking at that website. I'm like, man, this is awesome. Why did I not know about the internet before? So then I found out that Rupak, when he started this Indian Air Force site, he partnered with a couple of other NRIs, Seetal Patel, who was in the UK, another few folks, and they started this BharatRakshak.com, which was around 97 or so. And Rupak started the IAF part. Seetal was doing the entire site administration. And it was about that time I emailed Rupak and said, hey, I'm a military aviation buff. I can write stuff on history. If you are interested, I can start contributing articles. And he said, more the merrier. And I started sending him, one pages on 1940, Indian Air Force in 1948 ops, some stuff on 1965 ops. So about a year and a half later, Rupak sort of said, hey, you know what, Jagan, why don't you join us as a a co-editor of the website? And that's how it started off on Bharat Rakshak. So it was basically the foresight, the foresight by Seetal, Rupak, and others who started off BR. And after I joined, obviously, it gave me more motivation to put more information online, images, photographs, books. And as part of the website, I started like sort of publishing the 1965 stories that I had put together as a sort of
That
an
you had put
ebook on the
together.
website.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
Then it was very popular. Like there was a very small defense buff, Indian defense buff user base, and everybody liked it. The first 3-4 chapters, I got very good feedback, and people said, "Hey, these are the stories that we didn't know." Um, and one of the things was I was very what to call. I know the Indian Air Force didn't do that great in that war as it did in 71. So some of the good stories as well as the bad stories. I mean the ones that we suffered were also there. And two things happened in around 97, 98. One was that there was a gentleman who was the son-in-law of the legendary Pete Wilson. He sent me an email out of the blue and said, "Hey, I read the story about the Canberra attack on Badin. Uh, uh, Air Commodore Pete Wilson is my father-in-law. If you are interested, I can get you some tidbits from him." I'm like, I didn't even realize that was possible. Huh? These are like legendary heroes who are like far away. I couldn't even I couldn't even touch them with a barge pole. And when he offered, I said, "Please send me whatever you have." And he typed up a few notes. Wrote some excerpts, which he said I could use on the website. Parallelly, I had a friend in Bangalore, Dr. Shiv Shastri, and I know him via the Bharat Rakshak website. And I was on the side, I was basically bugging him, saying, "Hey, I heard that like there are so many flyers in Bangalore. Why don't you go talk to them?" And Shiv was a cousin of the late Kukish Suresh. So
Okay.
somehow I found out Air Marshal Wallen was in Bangalore. So I just told Shiv, go talk to Air Marshal Wallen and find out about MiG-21s because I'm interested in that. Shiv, by some chance, was able to get an audience with Air Marshal Wallen, and he came back with a couple of accounts, and I was like, damn, I mean, there's so much to find out because one of the stories from Air Marshal Wallen was how he chased one of the PAF sabers
Right.
on I think September 3rd, where one of the sabers flown by Moniruddin Ahmed. So he chased the saber, fired his missiles, both the missiles missed, and he came back. He came back frustrated. Now you that story was never published, never heard of before till 1998 or so. Turns out, Air Marshal Wallen wrote an article for Indian Aviation, and that had a very little circulation. But when he shared that story, he published it on the net, and again, people were again amazed. Oh, we always thought MiG-21's first air combat was in 1971. Nobody knew it. It happened in 65. everybody thought that in 65 the MiGs did not take part in operations at all. It may be old news to the veterans who were there, but for outsiders like us who had no connection, who were like reading up on aviation history, it was a revelation. Oh, MiG-21s did take part. They fired air-to-air missiles. Of course, they didn't have success, but this was what it was. And that started off a journey where we said, okay, where I thought, okay, let me go talk to veterans who are there. I started off talking to veterans locally in Hyderabad. Thankfully, Air Vice Marshal Parker was very generous to give me an audience. He literally encouraged me, provided me more contacts, and that's how it took off. I started interviewing veterans, collecting material, etc., and all.
Before you evacuate. S2Ep07, like your report type southeast connection for evacuate and deal selected.
I was wondering about that because, it is a fairly reticent group, and unless somebody introduces you and they trust you, they don't open up. So it's fascinating how some of these folks, one introduction led to a few more, and then you managed to get them to speak.
Exactly, and I had my fair share of what do you call refusals to talk to. so, so I still remember, AVM Parker was open to talking to me because I sort of name dropped Air Commodore Wilson's.
Right.
Of course, I never met Air Commodore Wilson, Pete Wilson, but the very fact that Air Commodore Pete Wilson contributed a write up to our website was enough. He said, hey, Pete Wilson is a legend. And if he had contributed something, I mean, that sort of opened up the doors. Uh, that was one example. At the same time, AVM Parker also put me in touch with late wing commander Farooq Mehta, who was also in 65 and 71. And then I, as you keep publishing the story, I started reaching out, started giving them an idea about what the website was, what I was trying to do. Uh, and the funny thing happened is the website got more audience across the border than in India. So they were Pakistani Air Force officers who were picking up material from the Bharat Rakshak accounts and publishing it in the Defense Journal. A couple of names I could think about is Group Captain Hali, Air Commodore Tufail, then Group Captain. So we could see references about Bharat Rakshak coming up in the Pakistan Defense Journal. So that was like a little more recognition than what we got over here. And at some point, I had all the history sort of written out. Again, it was a very basic level history with about maybe a dozen what to call veteran interviews. Then one fine day, a gentleman from I think at the time. So anyway, I got an email saying, "Hey, I read your website. My dad was also in the 65 Air War. He was awarded a Veer Chakra. His name was Squadron Leader PC Chopra, and the gentleman who wrote it was Samir Chopra, Professor Samir Chopra. So I
Right, who
know,
became your collaborator
yeah,
for
who
both your
became
books.
my collaborator, my co-conspirator, and all the other projects. So Samir initially offered encouraging words. He would offer send me pictures and all. Then somewhere along the line, Samir also like he picked up stuff saying, okay, I want to go talk to veterans as well. And I was, we were talking about, okay, I think he moved to Australia by that time. Then this amazing lead about Alfred Cook's story came out. So I happened to interview Air Chief Marshal LaFontaine in Medak, and he told me about Cook's story. We only knew bare details, but the way Air Chief Marshal LaFontaine told the story, it was a. I mean, I was all ears. And when I wrote it down for the website, people just went crazy. It's like, oh, we knew some things about killers and all, but one man going up and uh, fighting against four sabers, we never heard the story. Um,
Jagan,
uh,
Amgen served with us in Ambala in the 80s.
Uh,
And I'm just kicking. Vinod Patni was our chief operating officer, my dad's number two. I'm
mm,
just kicking myself that I didn't know. I grew up at the knees of all of these legends. Until I read your books, I didn't know anything about them and their stories. Uh, it is really, you've really opened a whole world for us with these
mm.
stories.
And if you look at if you look back in Asia Marshall Lal's book, he has a very cursory reference to Kalaikonda. He just says, Kalaikonda in the east, the PF struck the first blow, but we had some consolation where our hunters shot down two of their sabers. He does not give the names of Cook. He does not give the name of Mum Game for whatever reasons, and it was like uh, for a guy in the early 90s trying to find out what happened over Kalaikonda was a big mystery. Um, Then and one day in a library, I found this book, Encyclopedia of Gallantry Award winners. Obviously, I went through all the BRC citations and, of course, located at Cooks and Bungay. So I had a little bit of inkling that these are the two pilots involved in the combat. But till ACM LaFontaine told that story, I never realized what a story it was. Now, the second part of it is we knew the story. Then Samir was in Australia. He was attending one of the local Air Force Association veterans meeting, and somebody mentioned to him, Cook is in Australia, maybe you should go and meet him. And Samir did take the opportunity. He went, met Alfred Cook in person, and Alfie was a delight to talk, to interview as per Samir. And as you know, we've seen now as well, what a wonderful gentleman. And he remembered all the details. He had photographs, he had gun camera shots, and we were bowled over. Whatever Samir interviewed him, we had the tapes, we were bowled over. So uh, that was one of the primary stories of the 65 war book. Let me put it this way. Um,
Right. So,
by that time, yeah.
Jagan, I'd just love for you to
Mm.
uh, point the audience towards some of these pieces so when they pick up the book, and I hope it's still available, still in print.
It is. It is still in print. It is still in print. It is published by Manohar Publishers in Delhi. It should be one should be able to order it via Amazon. It was we submitted. So by the way, after the when Samir was involved in the interviews in Australia, I pitched to him saying, "Hey, Samir, you are doing so much work for me." At that time, Samir said, "Hey, use it for your book." I said, "I really cannot use this with just my name on it. You have done half of the contribution here, interviews. Let's do it as a joint project." And that's how we sort of collaborated it. And Samir sort of, he co-wrote it along with me. So we submitted the draft to a couple of publishers. One of our publishers very fortunately picked it up. In 2005, it was published, and they went into multiple reprints. I think it's on the fourth or fifth reprint, which is saying something for a defense book, for an aviation history book.
Right,
Um,
right, right.
so yeah, it is still available. It is there is a revision that needs to be done. We should probably do a revised edition, but again, it's a major sub project by itself.
So you have interviews, and then you had some articles and books that other people had written. Did you also have access to squadron diaries and things like that?
Well, not officially, not officially. We tried to get that officially, and obviously, two civilians, one sitting in Hyderabad, another sitting in Australia, has no chance in hell getting access officially to Air Force records back in year 2001. But again, as we started interviewing veterans, they started leveraging contact. Some of them actually said, "Hey, I have these documents lying in my cupboard for years. Take this." Um, and there are a lot of what do you call squadron diary type records that were shared with us. Uh, and in fact, there were a few serving officers at that time, names best left unsaid, who actually said, "You know what, I'll get you the war diary," and they would go to the squadron, make notes, get us the notes, and we use those notes to write in more detail within the book. And of course, we couldn't do 100% coverage. There are still many gaps, some things that we got wrong, but we did our best to refer to official diaries and official records wherever possible.
That's the one thing that struck me is while you've made the book incredibly readable, I mean, it is the sort of book that if you pick up, you will not sleep that night because you'll be up till the wee hours of the morning to finish the book. It's also meticulously footnoted, so you've tried to stay extremely true to the facts. And particularly in the hyper nationalistic kind of environment of social media today, that is really a breath of fresh air. Somebody who's been very honest about it and really stayed true to the sources and footnoted it and things like that. And I really want to compliment you for that. Was there a lot of effort kind of making a very readable book from all of these different sources and at the same time staying true to the facts and the sources?
Yeah, so I don't know if I mean that came out naturally in the sense that so the one of the thing is that when we are writing the book, when I was writing the book, and I was writing, Samir was putting it together. My goal was always I was writing a book that I would like to read, that I
Right.
wanted to read.
Correct.
So the way I wrote a book, I don't want any bombastic stuff in there. I don't want people to hide facts in there. I want to read a book that was honest to the things on ground. And looking back, everybody, I mean, a lot of folks would agree. The 65 air war was not the best air war that the Indian Air Force had fought, but at the same time, it was a tremendous effort. We fought it to the best of our ability. We paid a large price in terms of lives lost, aircraft lost. But what's the point in trying to what do you call market it as? I mean, we are trying to be very honest about history. Now, all the previous experience with reading the Indian Army history books had, because a lot of the Indian Army history books are brutally honest. There is no hyper nationalism about the regimental histories and books written in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They are quite well written. They would call out failures, and that was pretty much what I was also trying to follow. There was some influence, like for example, I don't know if you had read Len Deighton's Fighter.
Right, of course.
That book was very meticulously footnoted. Uh, and the other thing that I would love to do is when I have a photograph, I would like to write as detailed a caption as possible. Find something with a historical context to it, with that is contemporary. Write a story around the photograph. That also was something that I took away from Lynn Deighton's book, and all this sort of played a factor in making the book, readable. And since it did not have any, at that time, this is what we used to use the word jingoism, which was quite popular on the Bharat Rakshak website. It came as a breath of fresh air where we were really giving praise to the other side where we thought praise was deserved. And we also knocked them down where we thought, they were being too bombastic. So, and I don't know if you had read Air Commodore Sajad Haidar's book of Flight of the Falcon. In the introduction, he pretty much says he was motivated to write the book after reading our book on the India-Pakistan Air War of '65. He was he was moved by the impartiality of the book, but also he was also a little bit what do you call hurt by some of the scolding we gave about the propaganda efforts. He felt he had to set this record straight. But I'm glad that he gave our book quite a bit of credit when he wrote about it.
Now, then you shifted your focus, you and Samir, to the Eagles over Bangladesh, which was the book about the air war in the East during the 1971 war. How did you go about researching that? And
So yeah, it was just a natural progression. When you're interviewing a veteran of the Indian Air Force about the '65 war, and he also took part in '71, your interview was going to cover the entire war. I mean, his entire career. So, as part of the '65 war, we collected quite amount of interview material on the 71 ops as well. But on the flip side, 71 was covered quite in detail by Air Chief Marshal Law's book at that time. And there were always these articles published in YU magazine and others. So, but again, there are a lot of stories that needed to be told, and right from the moment we were like putting the finishing touches on 65, me and Samir were pretty much decided we should write a book on the 71 air ops as well. And we started off with good intentions of writing the war in one single book, but along the way we felt okay, it's not going to happen.
And so you focused on the war in the East and the preparation up to that and all of the action.
Yeah, so the original idea was to write. The original idea was to write one book. Then the amount of material we collected was so vast that we said, okay, this has to be split up. Then we focused our attention on the air war in the East, and and then we started like filling in all the gaps and holes and I will tell you, even though the Eagles over Bangladesh got published in 2014, it probably tells only 80% of the story. There are still quite a few stories about the eastern sector that have not been told, or probably needs to be corrected from our book. So there is aviation history is never complete. So that was the first volume of the air war. The second intention was okay. Now we'll do work on the air war on the west, but unfortunately, life happened. Family took over, kids, everything else. So it was sort of on the back burner for now. But then again, as part of the 71 war celebrations, there has been so much material, so many stories published. And I should also plug in a book that is being written by noted aviation. To me, he's a noted aviation historian rather than a senior Air Force officer. Air Marshal Vikram Singh. He's working on a fully detailed comprehensive book on the 71 air ops. So I'm waiting for that to come out as well because he's covering pretty much the same ground that we had done.
He produced a fantastic book on the Spitfire, which I'm hoping sometime to interview him about.
Yes, and I had the good fortune of having my third book, the Westland Wapiti in the Indian Air Force, being released on the same day Spitfire in the Sun was released. So that's both the books were released at the Center for Armed Forces Historical Research in USI in 2014. But writing these books, they sort of take over your life, guns. It's like just like flying, just like flying when you're learning flying. The 6 or 7 years that me and Samir spent on 65 Air War, the 8 years that we spent just on the Eastern Sector book, literally takes over your life because you're living, dreaming, trying to find out what is missing, the stories that are missing. To me, it was an all-in effort. I mean, if you're writing something, it has to be like 100%. So that sort of speaks why we had to like split it up and why the Western sector is still out, not yet done.
Before you evacuate. Just need 70, like your report type southeast, connection for the midway, and you'll select it.
And tell me about Warbirds. What are you doing there? And
The Warbirds is the fun stuff. Warbirds is the Warbirds is basically devoted to aircraft preserved in and around India. For those who know about British aviation, we have the serious World War II research books. And there is also the fun stuff, magazines like Fly Past and Aeroplane Monthly, where you read about vintage aviation, about classic warbirds, airworthy aircraft, etc. Again, now growing up in Hyderabad, I've never seen a fighter up close. Living outside of air bases, and the one time I probably got close to vintage aircraft was I was able to wangle an invite to the passing out parade, and that got me into Dundigal, and that's where I actually saw some of these jets in close up, including the preserved aircraft there. And Dundigal had a fantastic collection of aircraft throughout the campus. So I was like, okay, let me see what is out there that close by within Hyderabad, and there was absolutely nothing then. So somewhere along the line, I was collecting information on, okay, if I go to this city, are there any aircraft that I can go and publicly see? Um, Funnily, I did one of the in 89 or 90, I did visit the Indian Air Force museum. That was a trip by itself. And even in 89, if you go to Delhi and ask somebody about where is the Indian Air Force Museum, nobody knew.
Right. Yeah.
Huh? I remember me and my dad got onto a bus to go to Palam, and we were asking everybody on the bus, do you know where the museum is? Nobody knew. Finally, one guy who lives in Najafgarh village, he said, yeah, I know, you have to walk about a kilometer, 2 kilometers from this and that. And of course, that was another introduction to vintage aircraft. So I had photographs, I had some information. Again, they were all like in scrapbooks and things like that. And when the Bharat Rakshak website, when I got onto the internet, that was like a sidekick hobby. And I kicked it off. And that was also like, had gained a lot of popularity, not in India, but outside. A lot of the UK and the European aviation enthusiasts, they sort of loved it and sort of provided that encouragement. So I started Warboards in 2001, and it is still going on, along with Bharat Rakshak.
Right. And so people keep sending you photographs and locations, and you keep discovering new things, I'm told.
So it has become easy. It has become so easy nowadays because people don't need to send me anything. You can just go to Google Maps and look at some of the locations you see. Google Earth had made it easier to spot this aircraft from the air. Google Maps has made it easier. The proliferation of mobile phones, people taking pictures and hosting it. So the discovery part is quite easy. But I remember in 2002 or 2003, we didn't have digital cameras. So it was a major exercise to go and photograph a warbird. Also, not to get arrested along the way.
Right, right.
I had a friend who was living in Pune, and I sent him an email saying, "Go and take a picture of this particular warbird." And he went, and he got arrested by the Indian Air Force, and there was a big investigation about that. So it's funny. It seems just like yesterday, but it's been 2 decades now, and things have changed so much. Remember, in 2001, satellite photographs are impossible to get it. Then in 2006, Google Maps came up. Google Earth started publishing pictures about everything about India, and things have changed. So now, doing the warboards is not just about collecting pictures of aircraft and location, but also providing a story to that particular airframe.
Right.
These aircraft are just like people. They have an identity. They have a story. They have a life. A lot of time, what happens is when these aircraft are preserved, their identity is erased, over multiple layers of paint. Part of my task is to identify a specific aircraft, what is the serial number, and find out the story. Now, I can tell you one story about uh, a MiG-21 that was displayed in a hospital in Guwahati. And Group Captain TK Singha, a good friend, he posted a picture of it on Facebook. And I happened to run into it, obviously, vintage aircraft on display. Then I saw the tail number. And I pretty much immediately told him, sir, this aircraft, this MiG-21 that is in Guwahati on a pylon on a hospital, was the same aircraft flown by Air AVM Bishnoi
Ah,
on a rocket strike against the famous Governor House strike.
oh my God. Ah,
And he was bold. He was like, how do you know? Of course, AVM Bishnoi had shared his logbook. We know the tail numbers. And when I shared that fact with him, he leveraged his Air Force contacts. In the Indian Air Force Museum, they removed the aircraft from that hospital. They shipped it to Palam, and today you could see it fully restored, painted in just the same scheme. Now the story is attached to that aircraft in Palam. So it is not just some standard MiG-21. It is a MiG-21 with a history and a
with a
story
real
behind it.
history, with a very critical
So that is
history.
like a side story of the purpose of warbirds. There are quite a few stories that we have found out this way. about anonymous aircraft that had interesting stories behind them. I can go on and on. Feel free to cut this out.
Yeah. No, and this the serial number tracking I know of late has become controversial because they say that might provide some information to the other side. But you've been, quite particular about also logging incidents and accidents, and I know there have been kin of fallen air warriors who've found that very useful to kind of learn more about how their father or brother passed away. Uh, so some of that stuff that you do, the database of officers and their promotions and postings and career, their citations of their awards, all of this provides a lot of very interesting color, I think, to people who are interested in the armed forces. But I'm sure you also face some criticism from people who are a little more suspicious of putting this stuff in the public domain. How should we think about it? I mean, instinctively, I feel like this stuff is already in the public domain. You're just assembling it for easier analysis. But how do you think about it? How should we think about it?
It is, there is some valid criticism that if you're putting all the data out on the net, it does make the job easier for some of the intelligences of other countries. But from our perspective, say for example, if you're tracking tail numbers, on our website we are only tracking tail numbers of aircraft that have been retired or transport aircraft. You won't find tail numbers of Su-30s or Jaguars or anything that is currently operational there. Even though I track it personally, that information is not published. But what we are doing is nothing compared to what is being done in Western countries. In fact, there was a freedom of information request that one British aviation enthusiast sent to the British MOD, and the British MOD gave them all the tail numbers, types, and everything, and that has been published on the net. So sometimes we make a big deal about some of these things, but I understand. So that is one aspect of it. Now coming to accidents, accidents is one of the somber parts of aviation history record keeping. We are dealing with lives lost. We are dealing with families who lost their loved ones and didn't know why. And sometimes you have to when you write about an accident, you have to put the facts on record. Like if it is recorded as a pilot error, you have to record it. But again, pilot error doesn't mean that the pilot did something wrong. It was just his unlucky day on that day. He was doing everything right. Maybe on that day, circumstances led to this. But putting that information, there were quite a few families who reached out saying, hey, they found out information via the website because the stories were long gone. In 60s and 70s, the Air Force did not really share the full details of how the accidents happened. So a number of families were left in the dark. So now they are able to like sort of correlate the stories and things like that. Coming to the database portion of it, I was very lucky to to have Anchit Gupta, who now runs the famous Twitter account Anchit.
Yes,
He,
correct.
to do this, he happened to be one of the only few people with a passion for what you call collecting and maintaining data. I mean, some of the things are literally cannot be done by one person, and Anchit was a great help in kickstarting the taking the database section and simply building upon it. Like for example, unit histories, unit CO list. And I remember telling Anchit, I would have loved to have this kind of a database when I was writing the 65 Air War book. To find a simple thing of where Central Air Command was located in 1965 was a hell of a task in 2003. Huh? Or to find out who commanded CAC versus EAC and what the relationship between the two commands was in 2002 was a big task. Things have changed. If somebody is into aviation history now, we have made their job quite easy. And a lot of credit goes to Anshit for that. Uh, the awards database is another interesting portion of it. Uh, Over the years, I think up to 2006 or so, I had collected the gazette notifications of all the Air Force awards, And the Air Force was very religious in publishing, the award list citations up to 1988, and then they suddenly stopped publishing the citations. Fortunately, we I had the privilege of meeting Air Marshal Bharat Kumar, another prolific aviation historian, and he had brought out this massive book on gallantry and service awards of the Indian Air Force. It's and and very graciously he had after the book was published, all the copies have been sold out. He very graciously contributed his electronic files and said, Jagan, make use of, do whatever you want with it. If you want to put it in a database, go ahead and do it. And that's where the entire awards database is online. Anybody can go look up their parents, their kids, or even their own awards. Citations were available. It is there, almost 4,000 plus awards. So all these databases are like sort of now become indispensable. The only thing is, sometimes it worries me as to, okay, what is the future for all this data? It has to go somewhere. So that is something that we're still working on.
Jagan, I've taken almost an hour of your time, but what's on the horizon for you? What are the projects you're working on at the moment?
So, after all those years, I mean, almost 20 years running the website, collecting information and all, you would have seen, I'm sure you would have seen, Guns, the landscape has changed. Now we have a lot of other historians in the mix, collecting material, writing articles, writing papers. You yourself have been sort of a late bloomer in with the Blueskies podcast, which
Right.
is like an amazing archive of interviews. Uh, because I remember saying this with someone. For me to get to doing like about 40, 50 interviews took me like about 12, 13 years. And you have put so much material out there. This is all the information that future historians can make use of.
Yeah, and I'm very glad you linked to their service record everybody's interview, so it's easily accessible right there.
Yeah, and I think the US is one aspect of it. And again, now you see the proliferation of social media and Facebook. Veterans are more open to writing about their stories, putting photographs, putting their stories. They're participating in social groups. So the information is out there. So there is a lot of projects. If someone wants to do it, they can attempt it. Personally, I have several projects in my head and on paper that are like retirement. If right now I'm calling them retirement projects. History of a particular type of aircraft, or history of a particular squadron, a particular operation. There are so many book ideas. But again, sometimes you gotta think: is the era of books over? I don't know. Uh, but I personally would like to write books. I'd like to write detailed, well illustrated, well referenced books that can stand the test of time. And so that's always there.
Lovely. So I'll put a little plug for you here. First things first, veterans, if you can update your record, and there's, I think, a template that they can download and enter their service career and send it to you or to Anchit, then their record can get updated. So any veteran listening to this, please do take that little bit of time to send us your information so that that website can be updated. But also, can I say that anybody who's interested in working on some of these projects that you have on the shelf can reach out to you and volunteer to work on it?
Definitely. And if someone has a project that is close to their heart, we will be glad to provide that support in terms of what do you call, in terms of material, in terms of photographs. There are so many projects that we have already held. And again, thanks for the plug with the veterans. Please do email us. Simple email, airforce at bharat-rakshak.com. You could send us your update your the service record or photographs. We would love to update that and keep the database current.
Yeah, share anecdotes, all of those things will be useful. Great. Super, Jagan. Thank you so much for the work that you do, particularly for people interested in the Air Force, such as myself, is a real treasure trove. And it's just all a labor of love. You don't make any money from it. It's totally non-commercial. In fact, you probably put a fair amount of your personal money in maintaining things, but just very, very grateful to you
Yeah,
for
just don't tell that. Just don't tell that to my family and kids, okay? But thank you, guys. As you said, it is a labor of love, and it is our passion, and we are in it because it gives us a sense of fulfillment, and it is our calling. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, and for me, this is just one way of saying thank you to my dad and all his colleagues for all their service and the work that they put in. It's and the tremendous joy it's given me to be associated with them.
Yep, and no question about it. I mean, the pace of updates and the amount of effort, it requires some time and dedication. No two ways about it. Great work on your side as well, guys.
Thanks, Jagan, for your time, and wish you all the best in completing your flying requirements, and hopefully we'll go flying sometime soon.
Yep, sometime soon. Thank you.
Individuals show before evacuation. Just need 70, Roger, report type Southeast, connection for the midway, and you selected.
Well, folks, that's all we have time for this week. Join us again next week. In the meantime, sign up for updates at blueskiespodcast.com. There you'll find links to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also write to us with your comments, questions, suggestions, and feedback from the website or to blueskies@prganapati.com. Subscribe to the podcast on any podcasting platform such as Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and even on YouTube. If you like what you heard, share it with your friends, give us a rating in your favorite podcasting app, and write us a review. It will help other people find us. I want to give my thanks to Saurav Chordia for our logo and Prithvik for the music. I want to reiterate that all the views expressed here are personal, and this podcast has not been approved by or reviewed by the Air Force, Ministry of Defense, or any branch of the government. In the meantime, stay safe and Jai Hind.